The moment your head sinks into the pillow, the mind begins listing every way tomorrow could fall apart. It can feel like a flaw in you, this machine that runs hardest exactly when you need it to rest. But the late-night mind is not broken. It is doing something old and automatic. And it turns out there is a difference between having a thought and being carried away by one. So how do you watch a worry arrive at midnight without being swept downstream with it? Here is the part that catches almost everyone. The harder you try to shove a thought away, the louder and more insistent it grows, until the struggle itself becomes the thing holding you awake. Welcome to Sleepy Science. Tonight is not about forcing the mind into silence. It is about learning to stand a small step back from it, close enough to see each thought clearly, far enough that it can no longer pull you under, the way you might watch clouds drift across a night sky without needing to chase a single one. Let your shoulders sink into the mattress, and notice the mind still murmuring. And notice the one who is quietly noticing, with nothing to solve and nowhere to be. So we begin where every sleepless night begins, with a single thought after dark. And what the brain is truly doing in the moment, it refuses to let you rest. There is a particular kind of wakefulness that only arrives after the lights go out. The body is finally still. The room has gone quiet. The day is done. And yet the mind chooses this exact moment to begin speaking. It replays a conversation, drafts tomorrow, rehearses a worry you thought you had already set down. Almost everyone knows this feeling, though few of us ever say it aloud. You are not restless because something is wrong with you. You are awake inside one of the most common human experiences there is. And underneath everything we will move through tonight sits a single quiet question. How do you watch your own thoughts at midnight without being carried off by them? In daylight, thoughts have somewhere to go. There are tasks to answer them, faces to distract them, small errands that pull attention outward and keep it moving along. At night, all of that quietly falls away. The phone goes dark, the house goes still, and the mind is left alone with itself in a way it rarely is during the day. Without anything outside to catch our attention, whatever we were half carrying rises to the surface. A small worry that felt manageable at noon can feel enormous at 1 in the morning. Not because it grew, but because nothing else is competing for the room. The dark does not create the thoughts. It simply removes everything that had been drowning them out. Notice what happens in the first few minutes after you lie down. The body begins to slow, but the mind often does the very opposite. This is one of the strange asymmetries of trying to sleep. Physical stillness and mental stillness do not always arrive together. You can be perfectly motionless, warm and comfortable beneath the blankets, while your thoughts move faster than they did all day. For many people, the moment of lying down is not the beginning of rest, but the beginning of thinking. It can feel almost unfair, as though the mind had been waiting until you were finally horizontal and defenseless to bring out everything it had been holding back for hours. Some thoughts at night do not move forward. They move in circles. You consider a problem. reach no conclusion, and then find yourself considering the very same problem again a few minutes later, from the same angle, with the same result. Psychologists call this circling rumination, and it has a distinctive feel. The sense of working hard on something while getting nowhere at all. Ordinary thinking travels from question toward answer. Rumination stays on the question, turning it over and over like a stone in the hand, polishing it without ever setting it down. At night, when there is nothing to interrupt the loop, it can run for what feels like hours, always returning to exactly where it began. There is a particular direction these nighttime loops tend to fall. Rarely does the mind at 3 a.m. drift toward the best that could happen. Instead, it reaches, almost reflexively, for the worst. One small concern becomes a chain. If this goes wrong, then that will follow, and then something worse after that. Each link feels reasonable in the moment, and the whole spiral can arrive in seconds. By the end, you may be lying awake, rehearsing a disaster that has not happened and very likely never will. This tendency to slide toward the catastrophic is remarkably common, and it seems to grow stronger in the dark, when there is no daylight evidence nearby to gently talk it back down. There is an old Buddhist teaching about what it calls the second arrow. The first arrow is the painful thing itself, a difficulty, a loss, a worry that lands. That first arrow we often cannot avoid. But then, the teaching says, we fire a second arrow into ourselves. We worry about the worry. We lie awake, frustrated that we are lying awake. We suffer about our own suffering. At night, this second arrow can hurt more than the first. The original concern might have faded on its own, but the distress about being unable to sleep, about the mind that will not quiet, keeps us sharply awake. Much of what troubles us in the dark is this second arrow, not the first. Not all nighttime thinking is the same, and it helps to gently notice the difference. Sometimes the mind is genuinely reflecting, sorting through an experience, reaching a small insight, arriving somewhere new. That kind of thinking tends to feel like movement, and it usually comes to a natural rest. Rumination feels different from the inside. It is repetitive rather than progressive, and it leaves you more tangled than when you began. One quietly loosens a knot, the other slowly pulls it tighter. Learning to feel which one is happening is quietly useful, because the two can look identical from the outside. Both are just a person lying still in the dark. Only the person inside can feel whether the thinking is going anywhere at all. A common visitor in the late hours is the replay. The mind returns to a moment from the day. Something you said. A look someone gave you. A message you are no longer sure you phrased well. And plays it again. And then again. Each replay tends to sharpen the discomfort rather than resolve it. Curiously, the mind rarely replays the moments that went well. It selects the awkward, the unfinished, the slightly regretted, and loops those instead. This is not a sign of a broken memory. It is a very ordinary feature of a tired mind in a quiet room. The day is over and cannot be changed. And yet, the mind keeps auditioning other versions of it that might somehow have gone differently. Here is one of the gentler cruelties of sleeplessness. The harder you try to fall asleep, the more awake you tend to feel. Sleep is not something the will can command. It arrives more like a shy animal, only when you stop reaching for it and let the room go quiet around you. Researchers who study insomnia have described this as the effort paradox. Effort, which helps with almost everything else in life, quietly works against us here. And notice what it does to our question. If trying to force sleep only makes the mind louder, then perhaps the struggle at night is not with the thoughts themselves, but with how fiercely we fight against them. That small shift is where the rest of tonight slowly begins to lean. There is a frustrating threshold many people know well. The point of being too tired to sleep. It seems to make no sense. Exhaustion should carry you under, and yet past a certain hour, the body can feel wired, alert, almost humming, precisely when it is most depleted. The mind often speeds up rather than slows down. Part of what we feel here is simply the experience of wanting something badly and watching it retreat. The wanting itself becomes a kind of alertness. Anyone who has lain awake at 4 a.m, longing for the rest that will not come, knows this strange, wide-eyed tiredness, heavy and restless at once, the body pleading for sleep while the mind refuses to loosen its grip. For many people, the moment the head touches the pillow is when tomorrow arrives. Suddenly the mind produces a list. The call that must be made, the thing you forgot, the task you meant to finish. None of it can be done at this hour, which is exactly what makes it so insistent. The mind seems to believe that if it does not hold the item tightly right now, it will be lost by morning. So it keeps circling back to check, again and again, as if guarding a small flame. There is a tender logic in it. The mind is only trying to protect you from forgetting. But its timing is unkind, offering tomorrow's work in the one place where none of it can be touched. A quiet arithmetic often begins in the small hours. You glance at the time and start calculating. If I fall asleep right now, I can still get 5 hours. If I sleep now, 4.5. Each calculation is meant to reassure, but it tends to do the opposite. The math itself is a form of alertness, a way of gripping the very thing you are trying to release. And the numbers shrink as the night goes on, each one raising the stakes a little higher. It becomes a bargain with time that no one ever quite wins. The more precisely we measure the sleep we are losing, the more awake the measuring keeps us, counting the hours instead of simply drifting through them. There is a particular gravity to the glowing numbers of a clock at night. We tell ourselves not to look, and then we look anyway. Each glance delivers a small verdict, later than you hoped, less time than you wanted, and each verdict tightens the very tension that is keeping you awake. The clock turns the open, formless dark into a countdown, and a countdown is the opposite of rest. Interestingly, Our sense of time in the night is often unreliable. The 20 minutes we were sure was 2 hours. Or sometimes the reverse. Yet the mind trusts the number completely and answers it with fresh worry. Simply turning the face of the clock away is, for many, one of the small mercies of the night. One of the strangest features of nighttime thinking is how differently it reads by daylight. A worry that felt vast and pressing at 2 in the morning. One that seemed to demand a decision that very moment. Can look almost small once the sun is up. Nothing about the situation changed overnight. What changed was the state of the mind that was holding it. In the dark, thoughts arrive with a weight and certainty they rarely deserve, insisting they must be solved right now. By morning, that insistence quietly evaporates. Many people have learnt, through long experience, a simple and imperfect comfort. Whatever seems unbearable at night can usually wait until light, and almost always looks different once it gets there. Psychologists have spent decades studying this habit of the circling mind. The researcher Susan Nolan Hoxemer described a pattern she called rumination. The tendency to dwell repeatedly on distress and its causes without moving toward any resolution. Her work found that this style of thinking, rather than easing difficult feelings, tends instead to deepen and prolong them. The mind believes it is problem solving, but it is mostly recirculating the problem. What matters for the person lying awake is simply this recognition. That endless turning over is a recognizable pattern, not a personal failing, and not a verdict on who you are. It is a very human way the mind responds to what troubles it. Common, well documented, and, importantly, something that can gently change over time. During the day, we keep a kind of quiet guard over our thoughts. We stay busy. We redirect ourselves. We manage the difficult ones simply by not stopping long enough to feel them. Night dissolves that guard. As the body tires and the room goes still, the usual defenses soften, and feelings we had held at arm's length all day step a little closer. This is partly why grief, worry, and old regrets seem to visit most often in the dark. They are not stronger at night, we are simply less shielded from them. The same stillness that should be carrying us towards sleep also leaves us more open, tender, unguarded, available to whatever we spent the daylight hours keeping at a careful distance. There is a specific loneliness in being awake while the world sleeps. The house is silent. The street outside is dark. And it can feel as though you are the only person left conscious on the whole of the earth. That solitude tends to magnify whatever the mind is holding, because there is no one nearby to offer another view. No ordinary sound to remind you that life continues elsewhere. Yet the truth is almost the opposite of how it feels. At this very hour, countless others lie awake in their own dark rooms, thinking their own circling thoughts. The nighttime mind convinces us we are uniquely alone in our sleeplessness, when in fact it is one of the most widely shared experiences human beings have. Perhaps the most unsettling thing about the racing mind is how little we seem to choose it. The thoughts do not feel requested. They arrive on their own, one after another, as if the mind were a radio that had turned itself on and now refuses the dial. You did not decide to remember that awkward moment or to imagine that unlikely disaster. The thought simply appeared, fully formed, uninvited. This involuntary quality is part of what makes nighttime overthinking so tiring. It is hard to rest when it feels as though something inside you is generating worry without your permission. And the more we notice how uninvited these thoughts truly are, the more a quiet question begins to form about our whole relationship to them. Consider the strange mismatch of the sleepless hour. Outwardly, nothing is happening. You are lying still, eyes closed, breathing slowly, doing everything a sleeping person does. Yet inwardly, there is motion everywhere. Thoughts sprinting, scenes replaying, plans assembling and dissolving. From the outside, you would look completely at rest. From the inside, it can feel like standing in a crowded, noisy room. This gap between the calm body and the busy mind is one of the defining sensations of overthinking at night. It can even deepen the frustration, because everything about your posture says rest, while everything about your attention says otherwise. The body has arrived at the shore of sleep, and the mind is still out swimming beyond it. Notice how, in the dark, a thought can feel less like a passing idea and more like an instruction. The mind does not merely mention tomorrow's worry. It seems to demand that you do something about it. Right now. A memory does not simply appear. It insists that you keep examining it. This is part of what gives nighttime thoughts their peculiar grip. We treat them not as weather passing through, but as orders that must be obeyed, problems that must be solved before we are allowed to rest. And so we obey. We worry. We plan. We replay. Because it rarely occurs to us that a thought could be something we are simply allowed to notice, without having to answer its call. In the quiet of the night, thoughts seem to carry an authority they do not actually have by day. With nothing to compare them against, no conversation, no task, no other voice in the room. Whatever the mind says can feel simply, flatly true. A harsh judgment about yourself arrives and goes unchallenged. A grim prediction lands and seems like settled fact. The silence that should soothe us instead becomes an echo chamber, where each thought bounces back, sounding louder and more certain than before. Part of what makes the sleepless mind so heavy is this missing sense of proportion. Alone in the dark, we tend to believe our thoughts completely, forgetting that a mind at 3 a.m. is rarely a fair or gentle narrator. There is a fatigue that comes not from the thoughts themselves, but from watching them so anxiously. Lying awake, we often begin to monitor our own minds, checking whether we are calming down, noticing that we are not, then growing tense about the very tension. It becomes a kind of surveillance, a second layer of effort laid on top of an already tired mind. This watchful anxiety keeps a part of us braced and alert, which is precisely the opposite of what sleep quietly requires. Many people know the particular weariness of trying so hard to relax that the trying itself becomes its own exhaustion. The mind is not only racing, it is anxiously observing itself race, and that observing costs something too. Step back for a moment, and a pattern begins to show through everything we have named so far. The dark did not invent our thoughts. It only cleared the room and let them be heard. The loops, the spirals, the replays, the quiet bargaining with the clock. None of them are signs of a broken mind. They are what a tired, unguarded mind does when nothing outside is left to hold its attention. And notice how the question we began with has slowly turned. We started by asking how to watch our thoughts at midnight without being swept away. It is beginning to look less like a problem of stopping the thoughts, and more like a question of how we stand in relation to them. If you take one thing from this first stretch of the night, let it be how ordinary all of this is. The racing mind at bedtime is not a rare affliction visited on a few. Surveys of sleep consistently find that a busy, overactive mind is among the most common reasons people give for lying awake. Students know it. New parents know it. The anxious and the calm alike know it. It crosses every age and every temperament there is. There is a strange relief hidden in that fact. Whatever your mind has been doing in the dark tonight, it is doing something deeply, unremarkably human. Something that countless others, in countless quiet rooms, are living through at this very moment, right alongside you. So the shape of the difficulty starts to come clear. It is not simply that we think too much at night, it is how completely the thinking pulls us in, how easily we are swept into the current rather than watching it pass. We have named the experience from the outside. The loops, the second arrow, the uninvited thoughts that feel like commands. What we have not yet touched is why the mind behaves this way at night at all. What is happening beneath the surface when the thinking brain refuses to power down? That is a different kind of question. 1. The next part of the night begins to open. For now, it is enough to have named the water we so often find ourselves swimming in. You've been with us for a while now, and your breathing has likely softened without you noticing. A soft subscribe helps another sleepless mind find this sanctuary too. Now, let's pause together, one sleepy soul at a time. In 2001, the neuroscientist Marcus Reichel noticed something strange. Even when a person lay still, doing nothing in particular, certain regions of the brain kept burning energy, sometimes more than during difficult mental tasks. He called this the brain's default mode, the state it slips into whenever there is no task to hold it. Far from switching off, the resting brain quietly hums with activity of its own. The discovery reshaped how scientists understood idleness. The mind at rest is not empty, it is running a program. And that program, it turns out, has everything to do with why lying down in the dark so rarely feels like rest at all. This default network has a physical address. Its two great hubs are the medial prefrontal cortex, tucked just behind the forehead, and the posterior cingulate cortex, seated deep along the midline of the brain. Together they form the core of a system that lights up whenever attention turns inward. Brain imaging shows these regions activating in concert, like two ends of a single circuit. The medial prefrontal cortex is closely tied to thinking about yourself, the posterior cingulate to memory and your sense of place in time. When you drift into thoughts about your own life, these are the structures quietly doing the work behind the scenes. Feel the weight of your body settling into the bed, held, unmoving, asking nothing of you. Above that stillness, the thoughts may keep moving, and you do not have to stop a single one of them. You have just heard how the resting brain runs a quiet program of its own, turning inward the moment the world grows still. So this inward murmuring is not a fault in you, only a network doing what it was built to do. There is nothing here for you to solve tonight. Let one slow breath leave you, unhurried, and let the next part of the night carry you gently toward what stirs beneath the thinking. What does this network actually do? Researchers have found it most active during self-referential thought, replaying the past, rehearsing the future, imagining what others think of you, narrating the ongoing story of me. It is the seat of mind-wandering, of autobiographical memory, of the inner monologue that rarely falls silent. And crucially, the default mode network switches on precisely when external demands fall away. Give the brain a task and it quiets. Remove the task and it stirs. This inverse relationship is one of the most reliable findings in modern neuroscience. The less the outside world asks of you, the more this inward-facing machinery begins to turn. Now consider what happens at night. You lie down. The lights go off. The phone is set aside. Every external anchor that held your attention through the day quietly withdraws. To the default mode network. This is an invitation. With nothing outside left to engage, the brain turns toward the only place remaining, inward. The self-referential machinery, freed from distraction, begins generating thought after thought after thought. This is not a malfunction. It is the network doing exactly what it evolved to do when the world grows quiet. The stillness you sought as a doorway into sleep is, to one part of your brain, a doorway into reflection instead. Rumination carries a distinct neural signature. When thought loops in on itself, the same worry circling, the same scene replayed, brain imaging shows sustained, elevated activity across the default mode network, especially in that medial prefrontal hub. This looks different from focused thinking. Solving a problem engages goal-directed circuits that move toward a resolution and then release. Rumination, by contrast, spins without arriving. The network stays lit, cycling through self-referential content that never resolves into an answer. Researchers describe it less as thinking and more as the mind caught circling, returning to the same worry the way a slow stream eddies behind a rock, moving constantly and yet arriving nowhere at all. The brain normally runs on a seesaw between two systems. When you focus outward on a task-positive network engages and the default mode network recedes. When attention turns inward, the two trade places. In a relaxed, healthy mind, they operate in opposition. As one rise, the other falls. But studies of rumination reveal that this clean anticorrelation begins to blur. The default network stays active even when it should yield, refusing to fully step down. The result is a mind that cannot settle cleanly into either mode, caught between reaching outward and resting inward, never quite finding the quiet doorway that sleep so gently requires. There is another player in this nighttime scene: the amygdala. This small, almond-shaped structure deep in the brain is a threat detector, forever scanning for danger. Through the day, a steady flood of sights, sounds, and tasks keeps it occupied and balanced. But when external input drops away at night, the amygdala does not simply switch off. Deprived of real-world signals to weigh, it can turn its vigilance toward internal ones instead. Memories, imagined scenarios, half-formed fears. Threat scanning, it seems, does not pause just because the room has gone dark. In the quiet, the brain's alarm system keeps searching. And now it searches inward. The amygdala does not act alone. It sits on a seesaw with the prefrontal cortex. Under calm conditions, the prefrontal cortex acts as a brake, sending regulating signals downward that keep the amygdala's reactions in check. This balance is delicate. When arousal rises, when the body grows tense and alert, the top-down control weakens, and the amygdala's voice grows louder relative to the reasoning above it. The seesaw tips. What might feel like a minor concern by daylight can, in this shifted balance, swell into something that feels urgent and enormous, precisely in the hours when you most want the mind to grow still. This helps explain a familiar cruelty of the night. Why the mind so often generates worst-case scenarios. The brain carries a built-in negativity bias, a tendency to weigh threats more heavily than comforts. The legacy of ancestors for whom missing a danger cost far more than a false alarm. When the amygdala runs less checked, this bias sharpens. Ambiguous thoughts tilt toward the catastrophic. The unanswered message becomes a crisis. The small ache becomes a symptom. The brain is not betraying you. It is running an ancient survival program that, in the safety of a dark bedroom, has simply lost its usefulness while keeping every ounce of its old force. Beneath these thoughts runs a chemical current. Cortisol, the body's primary arousal hormone, normally follows a daily rhythm, falling to its lowest in the late evening, allowing the body to wind down towards sleep. But when the mind stays active and stress signals persist, cortisol and its related arousal chemistry can linger past their usual ebb. This keeps the body in a low-grade state of readiness. The heart a little quicker, the muscles a little tenser, the nervous system tilted toward alert rather than release. The thoughts and the chemistry feed one another, each keeping the other going, until mind and body drift out of the rhythm that sleep depends upon. Sleep scientists have a name for this condition: hyperarousal. Researchers including Michael Bonnet, Donna Arand, and later Dieter Riemann proposed that many people who struggle to sleep are not simply lacking tiredness, they are carrying too much activation. Studies have found that such individuals often show higher metabolic rates, elevated cortisol, faster heart rates, and greater high-frequency activity in the brain's electrical signals, even during sleep. The hyperarousal model reframes restless nights not as an absence of sleepiness, but as a presence of too much alertness. The system meant to power down is instead idling high. Its engine kept warm long after the day should have released it. To fall asleep, the brain must cross a specific threshold. The transition from wakefulness into the first stage of sleep, called N1, is not a switch, but a gradual handover. Deep in the brain, the thalamus, a relay station for incoming signals, begins to close its gates, quieting the flow of information reaching the cortex. Brain waves slow, the outer world dims, and awareness loosens its hold. But this handover depends on one condition. The cortex must be willing to quiet. The gate cannot close on a mind still generating traffic. Sleep onset asks the thinking brain to step back, and to step back voluntarily. Here is where the pieces meet. A default mode network still churning, an amygdala still scanning, cortisol still elevated. Together, they keep the cortex online, generating exactly the traffic that the wake-to-sleep gateway needs silenced. The busy inner voice is not merely unpleasant, it is quietly at odds with the body's slow handover into that first stage of sleep. And something in our understanding gently softens here. The trouble at midnight may not live in the content of any single thought, but in a network that has no off switch the will can reach. The thoughts are not the enemy. They are the sound of a system that has not yet been allowed to stand down. It helps to see that arousal travels two roads. Sleep researchers distinguish cognitive arousal, the racing thoughts, the planning, the endless replaying, from somatic or physiological arousal, the bodily tension, the quickened pulse, the restless limbs. Either road alone can keep the cortex awake. More often, they travel together, each amplifying the other. A tense body feeds an anxious mind, and an anxious mind tightens the body further. This is why simply willing yourself to relax so rarely works. It addresses one road while the other keeps driving. Both the thinking and the feeling of alertness must ease before the brain will consent to cross into sleep. And here lies the deepest paradox of all. Sleep cannot be forced, it can only be allowed. Yet the moment you try to sleep, willing it, pushing for it, monitoring your own progress toward it, you engage the very goal-directed, task-positive circuitry that signals the brain to stay online. Effort is itself a form of alertness. The harder you work at sleeping, the more you activate the machinery that keeps you awake. The thinking brain, asked to disengage, instead grips tighter, because gripping is what it knows how to do. This is why the night can feel like a trap. The tool you reach for to escape is the same one holding the door shut. Notice, for a moment, that you are not fighting your thoughts right now. You are only listening, There is nothing here you need to solve. No scenario to follow all the way to its end. Take a slow breath and let it out longer than you drew it in. Feel the mattress holding the whole weight of you, so that you don't have to hold anything yourself. If the mind offers up another picture of what might go wrong, let it pass by like a sound from another room. You and I are moving through this quietly, together, in no hurry at all. We'll keep going, slowly. There is a name for the shift we have been circling toward, and it comes from a branch of psychology called acceptance and commitment therapy, developed by the psychologist Stephen Hayes. Its central discovery is quietly radical. The problem, it suggests, is rarely the thought itself. A worry about tomorrow is just a string of words and images the mind has assembled. The trouble begins in the relationship you have with that thought. How closely you stand to it. How completely you believe it speaks for reality. Change the distance, and the very same thought loosens its grip. Nothing about its content has to change at all. Hayes and his colleagues gave that too close relationship a name: cognitive fusion. Picture holding a photograph flat against your eyes. You no longer see a small piece of paper in your hand. You see only the image, filling the whole world, indistinguishable from what is real. Fusion is that closeness. When you are fused with a thought, you are not aware that you are thinking. You are simply living inside the thought, as though it were the room around you. The words in your head stop feeling like words. They become the weather, the walls, the facts of the night. And, without noticing, you obey them. This is why a midnight worry carries such strange authority. Fused with the thought that tomorrow will go badly, you do not experience it as one possible sentence among many. You experience it as a forecast already delivered, a verdict handed down. The mind offers a story, and you receive it as testimony. And notice what the fused thought asks of you. It does not simply describe, it instructs. Worry about this. Rehearse it. Stay alert. You find yourself doing exactly that. Not because you decided to, but because a thought treated as literal truth feels less like a suggestion and more like an order you are already following. The countermove has an equally plain name: cognitive diffusion. If fusion is pressing the photograph against your eyes, diffusion is simply lowering your hand a few inches until you can see the paper again, its edges, the ordinary fact that it is a picture and not the thing itself. Diffusion does not argue with the thought or try to prove it wrong. It changes only your vantage point. A worry seen from this small distance is revealed for what it always was: a mental event, a passing offering of the mind, rather than a command issued by reality. The thought remains. Your position toward it has quietly moved. To step back from a thought, though, something in you has to be doing the stepping. This is the part acceptance and commitment therapy calls the observing self, the quiet witness that notices thoughts without being made of them. Consider it plainly. if you can watch a worry arrive, then you cannot only be that worry, because something is standing far enough away to see it come and go. All night, your thoughts have shifted, argued, contradicted each other, yet the awareness registering them has stayed constant. That steady watcher is not another thought to be believed or resisted. It is the still place from which thoughts are simply seen. You might wonder why we cannot just push a worry away and be done with it. There is a reason, and it was captured in a famous experiment. In 1987, the psychologist Daniel Wegner asked people to sit and, whatever they did, not to think of a white bear. The instruction proved almost comically impossible. The harder they suppressed the image, the more insistently the white bear returned. Wegner called this the ironic process. One part of the mind, checking whether you are succeeding at not thinking, has to keep the forbidden thought active in order to monitor it. Suppression quietly rehearses the very thing it means to banish. This is the trap that keeps a racing mind racing. Fight the worst-case scenario. Wrestle it. Order it to stop. And part of you must hold it up to check whether it has gone. Feeding it. Keeping it warm. Here is where Defusion reveals its quiet genius. It never fights. It does not try to empty the mind or win the argument. It simply loosens the grip and lets the thought be present without being obeyed. There is nothing to suppress, so the ironic rebound has nothing to seize. The worry may still appear, but appearing is all that it is permitted to do now. Underneath all of this sits a simple feature of the human mind, one that acceptance and commitment therapy traces through what researchers call relational frame theory. In plain terms, we are the animal that turns words into worlds. The mind links a sound, a phrase, an image to everything it means, instantly and without asking. So a single word, tomorrow, can summon a whole future you then find yourself standing inside. And here the question we have carried since the first hour quietly turns. We began by asking how to watch a thought without being swept away at midnight. It begins to seem the sweeping was never done by the thoughts, only by how near we stood to them. Which brings us to the image acceptance and commitment therapy is perhaps best known for, and it is worth understanding what it truly means. Imagine sitting on a bank, watching leaves drift down a slow stream, or lying beneath a wide sky where clouds move steadily across. Each thought is a leaf, a cloud. It arrive. It lingers a moment. It pass. The purpose of the image is not merely to relax you. It is a map of what a thought actually is. Transient mental weather. Moving through awareness rather than settling as fact. And you are not the leaf, nor the cloud. You are the stream that carries them, the sky they only cross. So let the watching begin gently. Here, now. Notice how the mind, even as you rest, keeps offering its small films of what might go wrong tonight, arriving uninvited, the way they always seem to. You do not have to send them away. Picture each one as a cloud you have decided simply to watch cross. It came on its own. It will leave on its own. And you can let it pass without moving with it. Something loosens in that watching. The heaviest of the pictures turns out to be only a picture. Drifting. Asking nothing of you now but the quiet attention that lets it go. You have just watched a heavy picture turn back into a picture, simply by letting it drift. Feel where that watching lives in your body right now. The small bracing behind the eyes. The breath held a beat too long, waiting for the next worry to matter. None of it has to be pushed away. Let the next thought that crosses be one more cloud you are content to let pass. And notice how the watching itself softens something low in the chest. From here, the night turns away from naming this quiet distance and toward the small, ordinary ways of resting inside it. Here is the first tool, and it is almost absurdly small. The next time a worry arrives, tomorrow will fall apart. You add 5 quiet words in front of it. I'm having the thought that tomorrow will fall apart. Nothing about the worry changes, but something in your position does. A moment ago you were inside the sentence. Now you are the one noticing it, being thought. Acceptance and commitment therapy calls this labeling, and its whole power lives in that tiny gap the phrasing opens. The half step back from which a thought can be seen rather than simply obeyed. You can practice this right where you are lying now. Let the mind offer its next small catastrophe, and instead of arguing with it, simply name the act. There's a thought. Or, more gently, I notice I'm having the thought that I won't sleep. The words feel clumsy at first, almost silly, and that clumsiness is part of the medicine. It interrupts the smooth, automatic way a worry usually slips straight into belief. You are not trying to make the thought leave. You are only changing what it is to you. From a fact pressing down on you into an event you happen to be watching. There is a warmer version of the same move, useful for the worries that visit again and again. When the familiar one returns, the one about failing, about being found out, about the thing you cannot fix. You greet it by name. Here is the "I'll fail tomorrow" story again. Naming it a story does not call it a lie. It simply marks it as something the mind has told before. A well-worn track rather than breaking news. And what returns night after night, recognized as a rerun, quietly loses a little of the fresh authority it needs in order to frighten you. The next tool sounds strange until you feel it work. When the mind hands you its worst-case scenario, you answer it silently. Thanks, mind. Not sarcastic, not dismissive, almost tender. Because your mind is not malfunctioning when it forecasts disaster at midnight. It is doing the very job it evolved to do. Scanning the dark for threats. Trying, in its clumsy way, to keep you safe. Thanking it does 2 things at once. It ends the fight, so there is nothing left to push against. And it quietly reminds you that the warning is the mind's offering, not the world's verdict. Some of the most effective tools are the most playful, and there is a real reason for that. Take a worry that has been circling. Say, "I'm not good enough," and instead of thinking it in your ordinary inner voice, imagine it spoken by a cartoon character, or slowly sung to a cheerful little tune. It feels ridiculous, and the ridiculousness is exactly the point. The content of the thought has not changed at all, but heard in a silly voice, it stops arriving as solemn truth. You are hearing the words as words again, sounds the mind is making, not commands you are required to heed. This playfulness rests on something psychologists noticed over a century ago. In 1916, Edward Titchener described what happens when you take a single word and repeat it aloud, over and over, for perhaps 30 seconds. Say milk, 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 until the sound keeps going, but the meaning quietly drains away, until it becomes an odd little noise your mouth is making. Researchers later named this semantic satiation. The word has not changed. Your grip on its meaning has simply loosened through repetition. And a worry, at bottom, is also just words. Words that can be worn smooth in exactly the same way. You can borrow that 100-year-old effect tonight. Choose the single word at the hot center of a worry. Failure. Alone. Tomorrow. The one that carries the charge. Then repeat it. Softly or silently. Slowly. Again and again. At first it may sting. Keep going. Without force. Past 10 repetitions. Past 20. Somewhere along the way the word begins to come apart, to sound like a curious arrangement of syllables rather than a wound. What is left is the bare mechanics of the thing. A mouth. A sound. With the terror quietly rinsed out of it. The meaning you feared was never fixed inside the word. Now the older image can become an actual practice, not merely a picture. Lying still. Imagine a slow stream passing before you, and a scattering of leaves drifting on its surface. Each time a thought arrives, any thought at all, you gently place it on a leaf and let the current carry it out of sight. Not only the thoughts you approve of, all of them, the anxious and the dull alike. You do not throw the leaf or hurry it along. You simply set the thought down and watch it go. Then return your attention to the water, waiting for whatever floats up next. Something will happen almost at once, and it is worth expecting. You will forget the stream. A thought will hook you, and suddenly you are far downstream inside the worry itself. Planning. Defending. No leaves in sight. This is not failure. It is the exercise. The whole practice lives in the quiet moment you notice you have been swept away. And, without scolding yourself, step back onto the bank and set the next thought on its leaf. Each return is a small repetition of the very skill you came for. Not the absence of thought, but the noticing and the gentle stepping back to the bank. Beneath every one of these tools lies a single quiet question you can turn toward directly. If you can watch a thought drift past on its leaf, then who exactly is doing the watching? Try it for a moment. Notice a thought arrive, and then notice that you noticed. There is the thought, and there is the awareness of the thought, and they are plainly not the same thing. That awareness has been here all night, steady beneath the churning, the still place from which everything is seen. You are not the worry passing through. You are the one to whom it is passing. Rest in that awareness now, for a breath, and feel how steady it is. It does not argue with the thoughts or grow tired of them, it simply holds them. The way a still room holds whatever sound passes through without being changed by it. You do not have to make this watcher stronger, or find it, or achieve it. It has been here the whole night, quietly present beneath every worry. Let yourself settle back into it. From this steadiness, a worst-case scenario is no longer an emergency to manage. It is only one more thing passing through a quiet that was never once in danger. For the worries that refuse to drift, the practical ones, the unpaid bill, the hard conversation, there is a tool that works with the mind rather than against it. It is sometimes called scheduled worry or cognitive offloading. Keep a small notebook by the bed, and when a genuine problem surfaces, write it down in a line or two, along with the smallest next step you could take tomorrow. Then close the book. You are not dismissing the worry. You are telling the mind, truthfully, that it has been recorded and will be handled, so it can loosen its grip on keeping it alive. There is a reason putting words on paper eases the mind, and researchers have studied it for decades. The psychologist James Pennebaker found, across many experiments, that people who wrote about their worries and troubles, even briefly, tended afterward to feel measurably calmer, and, in some studies, to sleep and even to heal a little better. The act of moving a swirling, wordless dread out of the head and into a fixed sentence seems to change how heavily it sits. Once a fear is written, the mind no longer has to clutch it to keep it from vanishing. The page can hold it now instead. And here the question we have carried since the first dark hour comes into clearer focus. We began by asking how to observe a thought without being swept off by it at midnight. Every tool tonight, the labeling, the naming, the leaf, the written line, turns out to be a variation on a single move. Not silencing the mind, but stepping a little apart from it, so its offerings can be seen instead of obeyed. The worst-case scenarios have not stopped arriving. What changes is the distance from which you meet them. The question is no longer how to stop the thoughts, but where to stand. When the mind is too fast for any of this, there is a doorway that does not run through thought at all. The body, and the senses reporting from it right now. Very gently, notice 5 things you can feel. The weight of the blanket, the temperature of the air, the faint sound beneath the silence, the softness under your head, the slow movement of your own breath. Each sensation is happening in the present, where no worst-case scenario can live, because catastrophe exists only in an imagined future. Coming back to the senses is coming back to the one place a racing mind cannot follow. You can move through them slowly, without hurry, letting each one be enough for a single breath. Feel the sheets against your skin. Really feel them. Their texture, their coolness or their warmth. Hear the layered quiet of the room. Notice the small rise and fall at your chest. The air a touch cooler coming in than going out. You are not trying to relax on command. You are simply resting attention on what is already. Plainly. Here. And each time the mind darts back toward tomorrow, you have somewhere ordinary and real to return to. The body. Still breathing. Exactly where it has been all along. It is fair to ask whether any of this genuinely helps, or only sounds soothing. The honest answer is that the wider approach these tools come from acceptance and commitment therapy has been studied in many trials, and reviews of that research generally find it can meaningfully ease anxiety, rumination, and the kind of stress that keeps sleep at bay. It is not a cure, and it is not magic. Results vary person to person. But the broad pattern in the evidence is encouraging. Learning to change your relationship to a thought, rather than its content, appears to be a skill that settles a restless mind. The specific move at the heart of tonight, diffusion, has been examined on its own. 2. In smaller studies. Researchers often use exactly the word repetition exercise you tried earlier. They ask people to rate how believable and how distressing a negative self-thought feels. Run the repetition, then measure again. Across a number of these experiments, both the believability and the discomfort tend to drop, and often within a minute or two. The findings are modest and still growing, and no single study settles it. But they point, consistently, in one direction. A little distance from a thought really does seem to drain some of its power. With so many tools laid out, you might wonder which is the right one, and the freeing answer is that it hardly matters. They are not really a set of separate techniques. They are so many doors into a single room. Labeling opens it through language, the silly voice through sound, the leaf through image, the notebook through the hand, the senses through the body. On a given night, one will feel natural and the others forced. So you simply use the one that fits. There is no correct method to get right, nothing to perform well. Whichever door lets you step back from the thought is, tonight, the right one. What every one of these tools quietly shares is worth saying plainly, because it is the secret. Not one of them tries to stop a thought, argue it down, or empty the mind. Each only widens the space between you and the thinking. A hand lowered from the eyes, a word worn smooth, a worry set on the water. And in that widened space, something happens on its own that no effort could ever force. The thought, no longer pressed against you as reality, is free to arrive and free to leave. You did not have to make it go. you only had to stop holding it so close. You might imagine stringing them together on a difficult night, though even this you hold lightly. Perhaps you notice the racing has begun, and you name it. There's the spinning again. You set the first few thoughts on their leaves. When one hooks hard, you thank the mind for the warning, or where its sharpest words smooth with repetition. If a real problem surfaces, you write its one line and close the book. And when all of it feels like too much, you simply come back to the blanket's weight and the breath. Not a rigid program to follow, a small handful of ways to keep stepping back. Do this for a while. Not perfectly, only repeatedly. And something gradually shifts, though rarely the thing you first hoped for. The worries do not necessarily stop coming. The mind goes on generating its dark little forecasts, because that is simply what minds do. What changes is you. The gap you kept practicing begins to appear on its own, unbidden. A worst-case scenario arrives at midnight, before you have decided anything. Part of you is already watching it rather than drowning in it. The skill has quietly become a reflex. You have not silenced the thoughts. You have changed where you live in relation to them. And this is where the long night's practice reveals what it was always building toward. Every tool has been teaching one lesson from a different angle. That a thought is not a command. The mind at midnight speaks in the grammar of orders. Worry about this. Fix that. Stay awake and be ready. And for most of a lifetime, those orders are simply obeyed. But a thought watched from a step back is revealed as something far humbler than a command. It is only a proposal the mind is making, which you are free to notice, and just as free to decline. Sit for a moment with how much turns on that distinction, because everything rests here. When a thought is fused to you, pressed flat against your eyes, it is reality, and reality must be obeyed. When the same thought is seen from a small step back, it becomes an object within awareness. A passing bit of mental weather, moving through you rather than ruling you. The words are identical. Only your position has changed. And that change is not a trick to feel better. It is a truer account of what a thought always was. An event in the mind. Never once a decree from the world. So the question we opened in the dark can finally be answered. In the mind. Before the heart catches up. How do you observe a thought without being swept away by it at midnight? You change your relationship to it. And that changes everything. Because a thought you are merely watching has lost the one power that made it dangerous. The power to be obeyed. The worst-case scenarios become passing weather you can watch move across you. Not commands you must carry out. They will still arrive. But arriving is all they can do. The sky does not have to storm because a cloud has crossed it. The question you carried into the dark has just been answered in the mind. Change where you stand. And the thought that once gave orders becomes only weather you can watch. Notice how that lands. Quieter than an idea. The worst thing the mind could say tonight has likely already been said. And here you still are, watching it not carried off. There is nothing to fix, no forecast you are required to answer. Let the next dark picture arrive, if it must, and let it drift on. What we have circled all night is very close now, not as a conclusion, but as the plain distance between you and the picture that just passed. Something has quietly assembled itself over these hours. Not a technique you must remember, but a way of being you can feel settling into your chest. The noticing, the naming, the small step back from each thought. These were never separate tools. They were one motion, the same gentle turning towards stillness. Tonight it has become less a thing you do and more a place you already are, resting here in the dark. There is a part of you that has been watching all along, watching the worry arrive, watching it argue its case, watching it soften. Psychologists sometimes call it the observing self, and it does not change when your thoughts change. It was there in your loudest fear, and it is here now, in this quiet. You are not the storm of thinking. You are the still awareness in which the thinking appears, and into which it dissolves. Consider the sky for a moment. Clouds cross it all day. Heavy ones, thin ones, the dark ones that seem like they will never pass. Yet the sky itself is never harmed, never crowded, never late for its own peace. It asks nothing of the weather. It lets each front arrive, thin, and move on. Your worries at midnight drift through in just this way, held for a while, then gone, and the openness that holds them has nowhere else it needs to be but here. A thought, watched gently, cannot keep its grip. The moment you see it as a thought, a passing event in the mind rather than a message you are required to obey, a little space opens around it. Researchers call this quiet stepping back decentering, and it loosens the thought's pull without any struggle at all. You do not push it away or argue it down. You simply stop taking the passing weather for the whole of the sky, and it drifts on. You may feel, tonight, that you do not have to win. The argument the mind keeps rehearsing, the one where you must settle every worst case before you are allowed to rest, was never a contest you needed to enter. A thought can be entirely wrong, and you can still let it pass unanswered. Sleep does not wait for the verdict. It comes to the one who simply lets the courtroom go dark and turns, at last, toward the quiet. When you quietly name a feeling, brain imaging research suggests the amygdala, the mind's old alarm, grows a little softer, as if being seen were enough to calm it. So the gentle naming you have practiced tonight was never cold analysis. It was a kind of tenderness, turning toward the frightened part of you and saying, softly, I see you, I am here. And the fear, having finally been met, has so much less reason to keep shouting into the dark. Consider that the mind was never your enemy. Every spiraling scenario it built at midnight was a clumsy act of protection. An old, loyal system trying to keep you safe by rehearsing every danger before it could arrive. It overworks because it cares. Tonight, you can thank it, the way you might thank a tired night guard, and let it know that it is allowed to rest now too. Nothing in this dark room needs defending anymore. There is research suggesting that meeting your own struggle with kindness, rather than criticism, gently moves the body out of its defensive state and into something softer and safer. The harsh inner voice that insists you should be asleep already only pulls the knot tighter. But warmth loosens it. Tonight, you are allowed to be gentle with the very mind that has kept you awake. And that gentleness, it turns out, is often what finally lets it close its eyes. Real rest asks for far less effort than you have been giving it. The default network of the brain, the quiet inner machinery behind self-referential worry, does not need to be fought or forced into silence. It simply grows still on its own the moment you stop feeding it with your urgency. You have been loosening your hold on the stream of thought all night, and now the stream can flow past without you wading in. Let it move along. You are allowed to stay here on the bank. There is a permission you may not have offered yourself in a long time. Permission to stop managing your own mind. All night, the instinct has been to fix, to solve, to arrange every thought into safety before sleep is allowed. But the mind does not need a manager at midnight. It needs only to be left alone in the dark, trusted to settle the way. Still water settles once the hand stops stirring it. You can set the spoon down now. You do not have to make the thoughts stop. This is the quiet freedom underneath everything tonight. The clouds may keep crossing, and you may still fall asleep beneath them. Sleep was never conditional on an empty mind. It asks only that you stop chasing each thought down its long corridor. Let them come. Let them go. And let your body sink through them into rest. Undisturbed. Unhurried. Already halfway gone into the softness of the dark. The body has already begun to answer. As the mind stops bracing, the slow exhale you have drifted into quietly signals the nervous system that the danger has passed. The parasympathetic tide rising, the heart easing, the muscles remembering their own honest weight. You did not force any of this. You allowed it. The letting go in your thoughts and the softening in your body are the same single movement, spreading now from the crown of your head all the way down to your feet. Something has turned in you that words can barely hold. The question you carried into the dark. How to watch the mind at midnight without being swept away, is quietly answering itself. Not as an idea, but as a sensation. The worry is still there, and you are still here, and the two are no longer the same thing. That, small, felt distance between you and the thought is the whole of it. You are watching now, and the watching itself is peaceful. There is a tenderness in realizing how long you have braced against your own thoughts, how faithfully you answered each one as though your rest depended on settling it before dawn. And yet tonight you have felt, perhaps for the first time in a while, how lightly a thought can move through you when you stop gripping it. It cannot reach into the dark and take your rest away. It can only pass, the way everything passes, while you quietly remain. There is comfort in how universal this is. In countless rooms tonight, other minds are doing exactly what yours has done. Racing, bracing, and slowly, finally, softening towards sleep. You are not uniquely broken for lying awake with a loud head. You are simply human, in the oldest and most ordinary way, and the same quiet spreading through you now has moved through millions before you. Even in the deep solitude of this hour, you are in gentle and familiar company. Nothing is being taken from you as you let go. The thoughts you release will still be there in the morning if they are truly needed. The mind forgets nothing that matters. Letting them drift tonight is not neglect, it is trust. You are simply agreeing to meet them in daylight, rested, instead of wrestling them here in the dark, exhausted. The night asks only that you set them gently down for now and lie back. Somewhere beneath the anxious planner and the tireless problem solver, the sense of who you are settles quietly into place, lower than the worry, steadier than the plan, the part that was never once in danger. This is the self that needs no defending, because a passing thought could never reach it. Let yourself sink into that settledness now. The clouds may do as they wish. Nothing they carry can trouble the stillness that holds them. There is nothing left to solve tonight. Every worry that seemed so pressing an hour ago has begun to lose its edges. The way sharp things blur as sleep draws near. The mind at the threshold of rest naturally loosens its own logic, letting thoughts drift into softer, stranger, kinder shapes. This is not a failure of attention. It is the doorway itself. Let the drifting carry you. You do not have to understand where it leads in order to follow it down. The observing has become effortless now. Earlier, it may have taken a small act of will to step back and watch a thought pass by. Now the watching happens on its own, gentle and unforced, the way you might notice rain without deciding to. There is no work left in it at all. Awareness is simply resting in itself, letting whatever arises arise and go. While you sink a little deeper into the warm and patient gravity of the bed, underneath the noise, there is a quiet that has been here all along. It did not arrive tonight. It was only covered over by the thinking. As the thoughts thin out, the stillness they were hiding begins to show itself. Spacious, familiar, and asking nothing of you. This is the ground beneath every storm you have ever weathered. It was never far away. You were simply watching the weather. Now you are resting in the open stillness itself. It is safe to stop holding on. All night you may have gripped your thoughts as though letting go would mean losing control. But control was never what kept you whole. Awareness was, and awareness needs no grip at all. You can open your hands here in the dark. Nothing falls. The mind carries on quietly without your supervision, and you are free, at last, to simply rest inside your own life without guarding it. There is a softness now that spreads without being asked, The worry that felt like a solid wall an hour ago is thin as mist, and your breath moves through it easily. Whatever remains unsolved can remain unsolved until morning. The night does not require your vigilance to pass. It only offers you the same rest. It offers every living thing when the light goes down. Quiet, impartial, and endlessly patient with your slow and welcome surrender. You are lighter than the thoughts now. They still cross, now and then, but they no longer land. They pass through and dissolve somewhere on the far side of the dark. You have settled lower than they can reach, held by something that has carried you all your life without ever needing a word. There is nowhere left to get to. There is nothing left to fix. There is only this settling, and it is enough. The watching turns, all on its own, into sleep. The awareness that observed each thought is the very same awareness that now dims at its edges, softening, widening, releasing its own outline into the dark. You do not cross into sleep by trying. You cross by ceasing to hold the shore. The observing self does not vanish as you go. It simply rests. The way still water grows smooth once the last ripple has crossed it and the dark turns whole and kind. And here, at the very end, is the gentlest truth of all. The mind was never your enemy. It was only weather, and you were always the wide sky it moved through. You do not have to quiet a single thought to fall asleep tonight. You can watch the clouds drift by, dark or light, near or far, and let yourself sink slowly into rest beneath them, held and unhurried, and finally, deeply free. 100 facts ago, the thoughts at midnight felt like commands you had to obey, each a verdict demanding an answer before you could rest. Tonight, they look more like weather. We followed the quiet finding that simply naming a feeling can soften the brain's old alarm, and the older idea of an observing self that never changes when the thoughts do. What began as a search for a way to stop the spiral became something simpler. The discovery that you were never the spiral, only the quiet awareness it kept turning inside. This is what you carry now that you didn't before. A thought is only passing weather, and you are the quiet ground it never unsettles. You never had to win the argument to fall asleep. If this hour helped loosen the grip of a mind that races just when you most want quiet, a gentle like, subscribe, or share leaves a light on for the next person lying awake with a loud head, searching for the same soft way down. One quiet tap, one peaceful night at a time. Picture the last clouds thinning over a wide night sky, moving slowly, needing no permission to pass. Let that same thinning move through you now, the thoughts spreading out, growing faint, drifting toward the far edge of the dark. There is nothing to hold and nothing to chase. Whatever crosses your mind can cross it freely, while the openness underneath stays perfectly still, holding it all the way the sky holds weather. Let yourself settle into that stillness, the watcher and the watched growing quiet together, until only the quiet remains. You can let these thoughts dissolve now. like the last of the weather clearing from a sky that was never troubled by it. Let your body grow heavy with the stillness that has been rising in you all along. Sleep carries you beneath the passing clouds, into the wide, open, quiet you have always been. The Psychology for Sleep playlist has spent many hours in this territory, the meeting place of science and the inner life. The next hour follows the part of tonight's question this one didn't have time to finish. That hour is waiting whenever you are ready. But if your eyes are closed, stay there. Rest well, quiet one. The mind that kept you awake was only ever trying to keep you safe. And now it is allowed to rest too. Gentle facts for restless minds. Sleep well. Good night.